Subscribe to the channel and hear even more exciting stories. My friend's betrayal changed everything for us. Hey Reddit, call me Jamie, 30F. I always thought I knew what friendship meant. I had this friend, let's call her Sophie, who was basically my platonic soulmate. We met in college, bonded over mutual hatred of calculus, and spent the next decade glued to each other's sides. She was my person. Breakups, job losses, bad haircuts, you name it, we survived it together. Our friendship was the kind of thing people envied. Brunches, wine nights, inside jokes, so old we'd forgotten the punchlines. I was the responsible one. Sophie was the chaos magnet. We balanced each other out. I trusted her with every secret I had, and I honestly believed she'd be the maid of honor at my wedding someday, if I ever bothered to have one. Looking back, there were a few flickers of warning I chose to ignore. Sophie could be intense. She needed constant validation, got jealous when I made new friends, and occasionally dropped little white lies. I'm sick, can't make it. But then Instagram said otherwise. Sometimes, when life went well for me, a promotion, a new relationship, she'd get weirdly distant or passive-aggressive. I figured that's just how some people are. Not everyone shines at the same time, right? But for the most part, I thought we had the kind of friendship that could survive anything. I mean, we'd weathered so many storms together. That's why what happened next knocked me sideways. I never saw it coming. Never imagined someone I trusted so completely could be the one to pull the rug out from under my life. If you'd told me a year ago I'd be writing this post, I would have laughed. But here we are. And trust me, I'm not laughing now. So, let's talk about how I found out. Because if my life was a movie, this would be the scene where the main character realizes the villain was right beside them the whole time. It started small, weird vibes at a group dinner, whispers that stopped when I entered the room, and people asking, "Are you and Sophie okay?" I laughed it off at first. Sophie's always dramatic. Maybe she was just in a mood. But then my phone started blowing up with cryptic messages from friends. Hey, if you need to talk, I'm here. I had no clue what they were talking about. Then came the bombshell. I was tagged in a screenshot on Instagram by accident. Thanks, algorithm, where Sophie was venting in her private story about me. It wasn't subtle either. Stuff like, some people pretend to be your friend but are really just waiting for you to fail. And it's exhausting being there for someone who never does the same for you. She even told this story about how I ditched her when she needed me, which never happened. The comments were full of mutual friends, agreeing or piling on. Some of the details were twisted versions of private conversations I thought were sacred. My heart actually pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out. I scrolled further and realized she'd been talking behind my back for months. Not just petty stuff, but painting me as a terrible friend, unreliable, even manipulative. I tried to remember if I'd missed any signals, but all I felt was heat. Embarrassment, betrayal, and this weird, hollow confusion. How could she lie like that? Why didn't anyone tell me? That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every recent interaction with Sophie, reading old texts, searching for clues. I felt nauseous, like my entire history with her had just been rewritten in a language I didn't understand. The worst part was seeing people I cared about, people I thought were friends, liking her posts, chiming in with, "Yeah, I noticed that too." I realized, for the first time, that my world might never be the same again. The next day, my hands were still shaking when I called Sophie. I rehearsed a dozen versions of what I'd say. Angry, devastated, maybe even funny, defense mechanism, anyone. In the end, all I could manage was, "Hey, we need to talk." She answered on the third ring, voice bright, too bright. "Hey, Jamie, what's up?" Like nothing was wrong. I skipped the small talk. "I saw what you posted. I know what you've been saying about me." For a second, there was silence, just her breathing on the other end. Then she launched into full damage control. "Oh my God, it was just venting. I didn't mean anything by it. Everyone needs to let off steam sometimes. Besides, it's not like you've always been the perfect friend, right?" That was her angle. Minimize, deflect, blame. I told her I didn't care if she'd been mad at me. I cared that she lied, twisted the truth, dragged my name in front of people who mattered to both of us. Her voice got sharper, almost rehearsed. "Well, maybe if you'd actually been there for me when I needed you, I wouldn't have had to talk to someone else about it." I started to push back, pointing out all the times I dropped everything for her. All the late-night calls, the favors, the emotional labor. She cut me off. I never asked for all that, Jamie. You're always playing the victim. It was surreal, like arguing with a stranger. The more I tried to explain my side, the more defensive and cold she got. She refused to apologize, instead doubling down that I made her feel small and that she just needed a break from the drama. That's when it hit me. This wasn't going to end with a hug or a heart-to-heart. The friend I thought I knew wasn't there anymore. Maybe she never really was. I hung up, tears burning my eyes, feeling raw, exposed, and deeply alone. The mask had come off. Now all that was left was the mess. For days, I walked around in a fog, replaying the conversation with Sophie like a bad song stuck in my head. Shock, anger, grief, they cycled through me in waves. I felt humiliated every time I thought of mutual friends reading her version of our story. I wanted to scream, to send out a mass email with the truth, but I barely had the energy to get out of bed, let alone wage a public battle for my reputation. Mostly, I just felt lost. Sophie had been my confidante, the one person I trusted with my ugliest thoughts, my biggest dreams. Suddenly, all our shared memories were tainted. How much of it had been real? How long had she been rolling her eyes behind my back, composing rants for her close friends list? I checked my own socials obsessively, paranoid about what else might be out there. Trust didn't just disappear, it exploded, leaving shards in every direction. I was angry too. Angry at Sophie for betraying me, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, angry at our friends for not warning me. Every interaction felt loaded. Was this person Team Jamie or Team Sophie? Did they believe the things she said? The second-guessing bled into everything. I started canceling plans, afraid of the awkward silences or forced sympathy. My self-esteem took a nosedive. I replayed every selfish moment Sophie had ever mentioned, wondering if she was right. Maybe I really was a bad friend. Maybe I deserved it. Then, almost as quickly, I'd feel this spark of indignation. No, I didn't deserve to be smeared just because she was unhappy. But that conviction never seemed to last long. Grief and doubt kept pulling me under. Sleep was a joke. Nights were spent doom-scrolling, rereading old texts, crying into my pillow. I missed Sophie. Hated her, loved her, wished I could call her just to vent about how much she'd hurt me. The person I'd always leaned on in hard times was gone. And in her place was this gaping, raw absence I didn't know how to fill. The fallout from Sophie's betrayal didn't stop with the two of us. Like a dropped glass, the cracks spread everywhere. Suddenly, my phone was quieter than it had ever been. Group chats fizzled. Invites to brunch or movie nights dried up. When I did hear from mutual friends, it was awkward and stilted, like we were all performing a scene none of us really wanted to be in. Some friends stayed loyal. Emma, my ride-or-die since high school, took me out for ice cream and ranted on my behalf. You don't deserve this, Jamie. Sophie's always been jealous. But others kept their distance, maybe worried about choosing sides. I get it. No one wants to be in the middle, but their silence still stung. I'd see photos of parties on social media, parties I would have been at if not for all the drama, and feel that sick, left-out ache. Had I done something wrong, or was everyone just afraid of Sophie's backlash? My confidence in other relationships wobbled. I second-guessed myself constantly. Should I text first? Would I sound needy? Was every awkward pause evidence that someone had heard Sophie's side and believed it? The worst was running into people who'd seen the posts. There'd be this little flicker of recognition, pity, or, worse, subtle judgment. I'd smile, act normal, and then spiral the second I got home. Even my family noticed the difference. My sister asked why I never went out anymore. My mom offered pep talks and sage advice about real friendship, but nothing helped. I started to wonder if I'd ever really had a solid friend group, or if Sophie had always been the glue holding it together on her terms. I realized how much I'd counted on her to make plans, to keep the group lively, to give me confidence just by being in her orbit. But with Sophie gone, I had to figure out how to be social again from scratch, and how to trust that other people really wanted me around, not just as someone's sidekick. The betrayal didn't just cost me a friend. It forced me to rebuild my entire sense of belonging, brick by lonely brick. The weeks after everything blew up were a blur of awkward encounters, loneliness, and so much overthinking I started to wonder if my brain would ever shut up. I kept replaying my options. Should I try to forgive Sophie? Should I fight to clear my name? Or should I just walk away and let the silence answer for both of us? At first, I thought about reaching out one more time, some desperate attempt to salvage even the smallest piece of what we had. But every time I drafted a message, I'd hear Sophie's voice in that last call, so cold, so defensive. The truth was, I didn't recognize the person on the other end of the line. The friendship I'd lost wasn't the one I was grieving for. It was the version of Sophie I'd created in my head, the one who'd never really existed. So I made my decision. I blocked her on everything. No more lurking her stories. No more checking for subtweets or shared playlists. I texted the mutual friends I still trusted and told them, gently, that I needed space for a while. Some understood, a few faded away, but a handful stuck around and quietly let me know they were on my side. It hurt a lot. There's a special kind of grief in giving up on someone you thought would always be there. For a while, I questioned if I was being too harsh, too dramatic. But each day that passed, the quiet felt a little less scary. I started to fill my calendar with other things. Solo hikes, dinners with Emma, new hobbies I'd always wanted to try but had put off because Sophie wouldn't be into that. It was like discovering I had a whole personality outside of our friendship. One night, I deleted our old texts, years worth of jokes, rants, selfies, and heart emojis. I cried ugly tears, then felt lighter, like I was finally making room for something new. I'd chosen myself, even if it meant standing alone for a while. For the first time since it all happened, I started to believe I'd survive this. Maybe, eventually, I'd even come out stronger. After blocking Sophie, life didn't magically snap back into place. I still caught myself scrolling through old group pics or wondering if she missed me, even as I worked hard to fill the silence she'd left behind. The first few weekends were the hardest, seeing Instagram stories from mutual friends. Some who reached out with awkward, thinking of you texts, others who pretended nothing happened, as if the group dynamic could just reset without me. For a while, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. There was a lot of awkwardness in the friend group. Some people tried to act neutral, inviting both me and Sophie to the same events. I went once, hoping to be the bigger person, but every conversation felt tense, like people were tiptoeing on glass. I left early, heart pounding, promising myself never to do that again. Support trickled in from unexpected places. Emma, saint, honestly, became my emergency contact for venting sessions, wine nights, and spontaneous road trips. My sister dragged me to a pottery class where, to her delight, I produced the world's ugliest mug and actually laughed about it. I started reconnecting with people I'd lost touch with, some from high school, others from past jobs. These friendships were different. Less about drama, more about showing up for each other in quiet ways. Still, there were hard moments, days I questioned my judgment, wondered if I'd ever trust anyone that deeply again. Some mutual friends eventually chose Sophie, or just drifted away. That stung, but it was honest. The circle closed, tighter and smaller, but also more real. Healing wasn't linear. Some nights, I still replayed old arguments, wondering if I should have said more or less. But slowly, I found comfort in solitude, in being able to make plans without worrying about how they'd be perceived. I realized I could survive awkward silences, missed parties, even losing someone I thought was forever. It was painful, but it taught me the value of being my own anchor, rebuilding my world one tiny, imperfect piece at a time. Months went by before I really sat down and took stock of what had changed. I wasn't the same person who'd once run every decision past Sophie or waited for her validation to feel good about myself. It sounds dramatic, but her betrayal forced me to look at every friendship differently, including the way I treated myself. I saw how many red flags I'd brushed aside, how often I'd put her feelings above my own, and how much I'd relied on her for confidence that should have come from within. I learned that boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about protecting the space where you can actually breathe. Sophie had always taken up so much room in my life, sometimes without asking, sometimes because I let her. For years, I mistook that intensity for loyalty. But now, in the silence she left behind, I started to recognize what real loyalty looked like. Emma dropping everything to listen, my sister dragging me out of my funk, even those quieter friends who just texted thinking of you. when they sensed I was struggling. Self-reflection is a weird, uncomfortable mirror. I noticed how eager I'd been to please, how I'd shrink away from conflict to keep the peace, even when I was the one hurting. Losing Sophie hurt like hell, but it also taught me how to stand up for myself, to say enough when a line was crossed, even if it meant losing someone I loved. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done in years. Writing helped untangle my thoughts and name feelings I used to run from. Anger, jealousy, even relief. I realized it was okay to miss what Sophie and I had, and still acknowledge the friendship was toxic for me. The longing faded, replaced by a growing pride that I'd survived, grown, and chosen myself. New connections grew in the space left by old ones. I found myself less willing to chase people who made me feel disposable. My priorities shifted. I cared less about being invited everywhere and more about feeling at peace wherever I was, even alone. And, slowly, I started to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, for loving so fiercely, for letting go. Eventually, life took on a different kind of rhythm. My world didn't shrink. It just rearranged itself, a little smaller but a lot sturdier. I focused on the friendships that showed up through the cracks. Emma's goofy memes at 2 a.m., my sister's pep talks, new acquaintances who respected my boundaries and never made me feel like I had to audition for their affection. I took more chances. Tried new hobbies, joined a book club, even went on a few awkward dates. I learned to savor my own company, to take myself out for coffee without wondering who I'd text to fill the silence. My confidence, once so entangled with Sophie's approval, began to grow from the inside out. I felt it in small ways, saying no without guilt, laughing without scanning the room for someone else's reaction, trusting my instincts even when they went against the crowd. With distance, my anger towards Sophie cooled to a dull ache, a reminder, not a wound. We never had a dramatic reunion or a teary apology. She stayed in her circle. I built mine. Sometimes our paths crossed, but I'd just nod and move on. There was no more urge to explain myself, no more craving closure. I realized closure was something I gave myself the day I stopped checking her Instagram stories. Mutual friends drifted in and out, but the ones who remained became a chosen family. My priorities shifted to honesty, reciprocity, and mutual support. No more ride or die drama, just the steady comfort of being seen and valued for who I am, not what I could offer. I began to see the betrayal not as a curse, but as a rough, necessary gift. It made space for the right people, and, maybe more importantly, it forced me to show up for myself in a way I never had before. I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is choose yourself, even if it means standing alone for a while. Because that's how you finally figure out what enough feels like, and what, and who, you deserve. So here's where I end up, months later, on the other side of something I thought would break me. My life is quieter, maybe a little less dramatic, but 1,000 times more real. I don't miss the constant roller coaster of wondering where I stood or what would set Sophie off next. Instead, I wake up grateful for small things. Coffee with a friend who actually listens, walks alone where my mind finally feels still, the ease of being myself without apology. If you're reading this because your own Sophie just shattered your world, here's what I wish I'd known. You are not stupid for trusting. Betrayal says more about them than it does about you. It will hurt longer than you think and end up teaching you more than you want. The ache will fade. The loneliness will pass. One day you'll realize you survived the worst and came out wiser, maybe even kinder, mostly to yourself. Don't chase closure from someone who can't give it. Don't shrink to fit someone else's comfort. The friends who stick around, who check in, who let you be messy and sad and complicated, hold on to them. Let go of anyone who makes you feel small. Your time, trust, and forgiveness are gifts. Give them to people who earn them. Boundaries aren't walls. They're invitations to let the right people in. I learned that real friends might not always agree, but they never make you question your worth. Losing Sophie hurt, but it was the start of seeing myself as someone worth fighting for. Now, I build my life with people who bring out the best in me, not the worst. And if you're still in the thick of it, I promise, this is not the end of your story. It's the messy, painful, necessary middle. You will laugh again, louder and more freely than before. You'll love again, with better instincts and a braver heart. And most of all, You'll look back one day and realize you didn't just survive. You grew. Thanks for reading, Reddit. If you're healing from a friend's betrayal, I'm rooting for you.